Before we begin this investigation into one of entertainment history's most troubling chapters, I want you to understand something. This isn't clickbait. These are documented cases, court records, and verified accounts of how power, fame, and institutional failure created a perfect storm of abuse that went unchecked for decades. Some of these stories will make you uncomfortable. They should. Let me start with a question that should haunt us all. How many monsters did we invite into our homes, laughing at their jokes, while they were destroying lives? The architect of evil, Jimmy Savile. Jimmy Savile wasn't just a television personality. He was an institution. For over 4 decades, this man with platinum blonde hair, gold jewelry, and ever-present cigars occupied a unique position in British culture. He hosted Jim'll Fix It, a show where children's dreams came true. He raised millions for charity. He had access to hospitals, prisons, and even Buckingham Palace. Margaret Thatcher considered him a friend. He literally possessed keys to Broadmoor Hospital, one of Britain's highest security psychiatric facilities. The system didn't just fail to catch Savile. The system enabled him. When Savile died in 2011, he was buried with full honors. Then the dam broke. Operation U-Tree, the police investigation launched in 2012, revealed a systematic pattern of abuse spanning 6 decades. Over 450 victims came forward, though investigators believe the true number is significantly higher. His victims included children as young as 5 years old, elderly patients in hospitals, individuals with severe disabilities, and psychiatric patients in the institutions where he volunteered. Multiple formal investigations, including the BBC's internal review and the Department of Health inquiry, confirmed that warning signs existed throughout his career. Staff members at hospitals reported concerns. BBC employees witnessed inappropriate behavior. But Savile's charitable work, his eccentricity, and his connections to powerful figures created a shield of protection. Here's what makes the Savile case a watershed moment in understanding institutional failure. He told us who he was. In interviews, he made jokes about having free access to young people. He described himself as feared in every girls' school in Britain. He wore his predatory nature as a costume of eccentricity, and British culture accepted it because he was famous, because he raised money, because confronting him would have been inconvenient. The question we're still grappling with: if the most prolific serial abuser in British entertainment history operated in plain sight, who else did we miss? The sitcom Dad Robert Hughes. In Australian living rooms throughout the 1980s and early 1990s, Robert Hughes was a beloved father figure. His role in Hey Dad made him a household name, the kind of actor parents trusted. Behind the scenes, Hughes was systematically abusing that trust. In 2014, an Australian court convicted Hughes on multiple charges of child sexual assault and indecent assault. The trial revealed a pattern of abuse spanning years, involving cast members and other young people connected to the production. Unlike Savile, Hughes faced justice while alive. The court sentenced him to 10 years imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 6 years. What the trial revealed was disturbing but familiar. Warning signs existed. Former cast members had spoken out years before formal charges were filed. Whispers circulated within the industry. But as with so many cases, the machinery of fame and television production continued operating. The show remained in syndication until the conviction. Hughes's image as a safe, fatherly figure provided cover for predatory behavior. The judge's sentencing remarks emphasized the deliberate abuse of trust and celebrity status. Hughes had weaponized his position as both an adult authority figure and a television star beloved by children. Following the conviction, Australian television networks removed Hey Dad from all programming. The cultural reckoning was swift, but it came decades too late for his victims. The soap opera villain, Leslie Grantham. Leslie Grantham's story presents a different kind of moral complexity. Before becoming Dirty Den Watts on EastEnders, one of British television's most iconic characters, Grantham was convicted of murder. In 1966, while serving in the British Army in Germany, the 19-year-old Grantham attempted to rob a taxi driver. The robbery turned violent. Grantham shot and killed the driver. German courts convicted him of murder and sentenced him to life imprisonment. He served 10 years before release on parole. While incarcerated, Grantham discovered acting through a prison drama program. Upon release, he enrolled in drama school, and by the early 1980s, he was working professionally. The BBC cast him in EastEnders in 1985, and audiences embraced the irony, a real-life ex-convict playing a morally ambiguous soap villain. For years, this appeared to be a redemption narrative. Then came 2004. While filming in Bulgaria, a British tabloid exposed Grantham in a webcam scandal. Though the incident involved no criminal charges, it destroyed what remained of his carefully rebuilt career and reputation. Grantham's case raises uncomfortable questions about redemption, second chances, and whether someone convicted of taking a life can truly rehabilitate. He served his legal sentence. He rebuilt a career, but the public never reached consensus on whether he earned his second act or whether some actions permanently disqualify someone from celebrity. The comedy writer, Chris Langham. Chris Langham operated at the pinnacle of British comedy writing and performance. He contributed to Not the 9 O'Clock News and starred in The Thick of It as Hugh Abbott, a hapless government minister constantly navigating scandals and cover-ups. The irony would become unbearable. In 2007, courts convicted Langham of downloading child sexual abuse images. During trial, Langham claimed he accessed the material as research for a role. The jury rejected this defense. He received a 10-month sentence and placement on the sex offenders register. Unlike others who denied everything, Langham admitted to downloading the material while disputing his motivation. This distinction mattered legally but meant nothing to public perception or his career. Projects were immediately canceled. His name disappeared from credits and retrospectives. Colleagues who had worked closely with him struggled to respond publicly. What made Langham's case particularly unsettling was his position within the industry. He wasn't an outsider or a problematic figure everyone whispered about. He was intelligent, articulate, respected, deeply embedded in British comedy's institutional structure. His case demonstrated that predatory behavior doesn't announce itself through obvious warning signs or social marginalization. After serving his sentence, Langham attempted to return to public work through small projects and interviews. Nothing gained traction. British audiences, often forgiving of various transgressions, established a clear boundary here. His case remains a difficult footnote in British comedy history, a reminder that talent and respectability don't preclude darkness. The variety star, Freddy Starr. Freddy Starr built his career on outrageous behavior. A comedian and variety performer throughout the 1970s and 1980s, Starr was loud, unpredictable, and shameless. Tabloids loved him because he generated headlines through sheer force of personality. Operation U-Tree, the investigation triggered by the Savile revelations, pulled Starr into scrutiny. He was arrested and questioned multiple times. Eventually, the Crown Prosecution Service determined insufficient evidence existed to charge him criminally. However, a separate civil case proved devastating. Starr sued a woman who publicly accused him of groping her as a teenager backstage in the 1970s. He sued for libel. The court sided with the accuser. The judge found her claim substantially true under civil law standards. While not a criminal conviction, the verdict was legally significant and destroyed Starr's attempted comeback. Starr's response was to leave Britain for Spain. He gave bitter interviews about conspiracies and betrayal. When he died in 2019, obituaries struggled with his legacy. No criminal conviction existed, but a civil court had found credible evidence of sexual assault. Starr's case occupies uncomfortable legal and moral territory. The criminal justice system didn't convict him, but civil courts validated his accuser's claims. His story demonstrates that not all predatory behavior results in criminal prosecution, and that civil judgments carry their own weight in public memory. The method actor, John Bindon. John Bindon didn't play criminals in British crime films. According to numerous accounts, he was Dors one. His connections to London's criminal underworld during the 1970s weren't method acting preparation. They were his actual social circle. He associated with the Kray twins, Britain's most notorious gangsters. Bindon's rough appearance and authentic menace made him perfect for roles in films like Get Carter and Performance. Directors valued his genuine intimidation factor. But in 1978, the line between performance and reality dissolved completely. Bindon stood trial for the murder of gangster John Dark, following what prosecutors described as a violent altercation. The case generated massive headlines. Bindon claimed self-defense. The prosecution painted him as a man too comfortable with violence, too enmeshed in criminal circles for the killing to be coincidental. The jury acquitted him. However, the acquittal didn't restore his career. Directors stopped calling. Insurance companies refused to cover productions featuring him. His connections to genuine criminal violence, regardless of the verdict, made him unemployable in an industry that preferred simulated danger. Bindon retreated from public life and died in 1993 in relative obscurity. His story raises questions about where performance ends and reality begins, and whether the entertainment industry's fascination with authentic criminal menace created a space for genuinely dangerous individuals. The screen-heavy Darren Nesbitt. Darren Nesbitt had the perfect face for villains, angular, cold, memorable. British television in the 1960s and 1970s cast him repeatedly as Nazi officers, corrupt inspectors, and men with hidden agendas. He filled these roles effortlessly. In 1973, his private life exploded into public view. Nesbitt pleaded guilty to assaulting his wife after discovering her affair. Court documentation and news reports from the period described the assault as serious, resulting in charges of assault occasioning actual bodily harm. He received a fine, and the marriage ended. What's striking about Nesbitt's case isn't the assault itself, though that's obviously serious, but the aftermath. The entertainment industry didn't blacklist him. He continued working. The case was reported but treated as a private matter, unfortunate but not career-ending. This was 1973. Domestic violence cases involving public figures were often framed as personal matters rather than disqualifying incidents. Nesbitt gave interviews years later describing the incident as a mistake, language that in cases of violence never feels adequate. Nesbitt's story illustrates how fame provided insulation from consequences, particularly for crimes that occurred in private. If the damage stayed domestic and media coverage remained manageable, careers continued. The machine kept running because it never really stopped to judge. The shapeshifter, Peter Sellers. Peter Sellers made the world laugh by disappearing into other people. Inspector Clouseau, Dr. Strangelove, Chance the Gardener. Each performance was a masterpiece of transformation. Sellers was so skilled at becoming other characters that he struggled to maintain a stable identity as himself. No criminal charges ever touched Sellers, but friends, biographers, and family members painted a deeply troubling portrait of emotional cruelty, manipulation, and volatile behavior. His relationships, particularly with his children and romantic partners, were marked by controlling behavior and alarming mood swings. His daughter spoke publicly about being estranged from him for years, describing his behavior as psychologically damaging. One wife recounted him threatening suicide in front of her, then casually returning to dinner when she reacted. These accounts are credible, consistent, and chilling. None of this affected his career during his lifetime. If anything, it enhanced the mythos, the tortured genius, the fragile ego hiding behind 1,000 faces. The press romanticized the contradictions, and the industry looked away. Recent years have brought re-examination of Sellers' legacy. The conversation has shifted from "how funny was he" to "at what cost?" The laughter hasn't stopped, but the shadow behind it has grown more defined. Because Sellers didn't just play men unraveling, he lived as one. The Hellraiser, Oliver Reed. Oliver Reed was the actor you hired if you wanted your production to end in chaos. Known equally for brawling, drinking, and volcanic performances, Reed was magnetic on screen and destructive everywhere else. His filmography includes powerful performances in Women in Love, The Devils, and Oliver. On screen, he brought raw, volatile energy. Off-screen, that energy manifested as bar fights, public tirades, damaged hotel rooms, and damaged relationships. Stories of his drinking were legendary, often recounted with nervous laughter by those who survived working with him. Some productions refused to cast him entirely, citing risk. Insurance companies balked. His behavior wasn't merely disruptive. Crew members and colleagues were harmed emotionally and physically, though incidents were often paid off or dismissed as part of his brand. The strange paradox: the more he misbehaved, the more his legend grew. He became a patron saint of lost causes, the last true movie rebel. Reed fed into this mythology, once claiming to have consumed 126 pints of beer in a weekend, but cracks appeared. The drinking destroyed his health. Roles became scarcer. By the 1990s, he generated more press for his exploits than his acting. He died in 1999 during the filming of Gladiator, reportedly after challenging sailors to a drinking contest. Oliver Reed wasn't evil in a calculated sense, but he caused genuine harm to himself and others. His case demonstrates that not all damage comes with handcuffs. Sometimes it comes with applause. The soap opera constant, William Roache. For over half a century, William Roache represented stability on British television. As Ken Barlow in Coronation Street, he outlasted trends, actors, and entire decades. He was dependable, familiar, grandfatherly, a presence that made time feel ordered. In 2013, Roache was arrested and charged with multiple counts of historical sexual offenses dating to the 1960s and 1970s. The media storm was immediate and merciless. He was suspended from Coronation Street, and his untouchable legacy was suddenly very much in question. But here's where the story diverges. Roache stood trial in 2014 and was acquitted on all counts. The jury found him not guilty. There was no conviction, no sentence. Legally, he was innocent. However, even with complete acquittal, the aftermath was complicated. Roache returned to the show, but the accusations lingered in public consciousness. Some viewers never looked at Ken Barlow the same way. The accusations, not the verdict, became what many remembered. Roache's case became a study in how reputations bend under the weight of accusation itself. The media frenzy, online speculation, trial by social media. Even with an innocent verdict, his image was permanently altered not by what was proven, but by what was alleged and imagined. This isn't a story about guilt. It's about the strange weight of accusation and how quickly decades of public trust can fracture under it. The glamour icon, Diana Dors. Diana Dors was Britain's answer to Marilyn Monroe, but with more bite and better self-awareness. With platinum hair and sharp wit, she dominated screens from the 1940s through the 1960s. She was glamorous yet grounded, loved and loathed, often simultaneously. Dors had a talent for controversy and sometimes manufactured her own scandals. She admitted to leaking stories to the press, a proto-reality star before the genre existed. but some of her entanglements had genuine legal consequences. In the 1950s, she received a suspended sentence for fraudulent conversion related to a car dispute. Later years brought investigations tied to money troubles and rumored blackmail schemes involving secret recordings at her lavish parties. The line between myth and reality was deliberately blurred, often by Dors herself. Though never jailed, she became a permanent fixture in courtrooms and tabloid speculation. Her parties, allegedly featuring hidden cameras and high-profile guests, became urban legends. She denied wrongdoing while leaning into the gossip just enough to keep herself relevant. Dors spent her final years attempting to reshape her image, speaking about spirituality and motherhood, but headlines never fully released her. Even in death, the myth continues expanding. She may not have been the most dangerous figure discussed here, but she understood how to profit from trouble. Her legacy remains double-sided, a woman both punished and admired for refusing to behave according to expectations. The laugh-in star, Judy Carne. In the late 1960s, Judy Carne was a household name as the sock-it-to-me girl on Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. She was the kinetic center of one of television's most surreal and successful variety shows, throwing herself into slapstick with intelligence and charm. But Carne's real life followed a darker trajectory. As fame rose, roles stopped coming as quickly. The persona that made her a star, quirky, zany, endlessly cheerful, began unraveling under pressure. By the mid-1970s, she was spiraling publicly. Multiple arrests for drug possession followed her through the years. She moved in and out of courtrooms, rehab centers, and magazine headlines. Her 1980s memoir was raw and unfiltered, examining fame, addiction, and regret. It shocked readers but didn't restore her career. Unlike many on this list, Carne's damage was primarily self-inflicted. She imploded publicly rather than harming others. But her arrests, court records, and public breakdowns became her legacy. Carne died in 2015, far from the limelight that once adored her. Her story is remembered less for her comedy and more for the collapse that followed, a reminder that fame doesn't always break loudly. Sometimes it fades painfully and slowly until only the arrest photos remain. The rock survivor, Marianne Faithful. Marianne Faithful was never just an actress, singer, or muse. She was all of them and more. The face of swinging London, a critical darling, a public cautionary tale, and ultimately a cultural survivor. She made her name in the 1960s with both haunting vocals and hypnotic screen presence in films like The Girl on a Motorcycle. Behind the ethereal image was a woman at war with herself and with a public more interested in owning her than understanding her. Faithful's descent into heroin addiction in the 1970s was extensively documented. She was arrested multiple times, including for possession and a bizarre incident involving a stolen mink coat, one of the era's most surreal celebrity headlines. She later admitted the coat was taken from a friend during a chaotic drug binge. The arrests didn't destroy her entirely. If anything, they added to the mystique. But the costs were severe. Her career derailed, her health deteriorated, and relationships suffered under the weight of addiction and distrust. Faithful's story isn't one of legal punishment in the conventional sense. It's about visible unraveling with the justice system playing a supporting role in a larger personal tragedy. She never pretended to be innocent, nor did she lean on victimhood. She simply kept showing up, sometimes wrecked, sometimes radiant. Her later work, especially in music, won critical praise. Today, her legacy is a complicated mix of critical respect, personal resilience, and public spectacle. She outlived many of her demons, though their fingerprints remain in the archives. The Velvet Detective, Peter Wyngarde. For a few brilliant years in the 1970s, Peter Wyngarde epitomized a particular kind of British masculinity. As Jason King, the champagne-swilling, velvet-clad detective, he was adored by women and envied by men. His posters sold by the truckload. His persona was so magnetically convincing that people confused fiction with reality. The illusion shattered in 1975 at a Gloucester bus station toilet. Wyngarde was arrested and fined for what period newspapers called gross indecency, legal terminology and social shorthand for criminalized homosexual behavior in a public place. The scandal was immediate, nuclear, and permanent. The man who'd sold himself as a ladies' man was overnight someone nobody wanted to mention. The legal punishment was merely a fine, but for his public image, it was exile. The irony was distinctly British. The actor, known for suave charm, had played the role so successfully that audiences were too puritanical to forgive the human truth behind the performance. Wyngarde didn't vanish entirely. He continued working, barely, but never recovered his former status. In later interviews, he referred to the incident cryptically as a misunderstanding, but nothing about the professional fallout was misunderstood. Was he evil? Not by any modern measure. But in his time, the scandal hinted at something newspapers and audiences treated as deviant. A career built on illusion collapsed under the weight of human truth, bracketed forever as a scandal footnote. The question this raises: what happens when sin is defined by the decade? The beloved character actor Wilfrid Brambell. There are two Wilfrid Brambells, the one audiences remember and the one they were never meant to know about. The public Brambell was legendary. Albert Steptoe in Steptoe and Son, the grumpy, filthy rag-and-bone man in a show so beloved it etched itself into British culture. He played the role so convincingly that people assumed he lived that way. He didn't. Brambell lived in hotels, spoke with a clipped accent off-screen, and carried himself like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. He was, by many accounts, tortured, closeted in a time when that closet came with legal consequences. In 1962, Brambell was arrested for persistently importuning in a public toilet, Britain's go-to charge for prosecuting gay men during post-war moral panic. He received a conditional discharge with no jail time but plenty of press. That should have been the end. But after his death, darker allegations emerged. Whispers, memoir references, posthumous claims extending far beyond legal gray zones, accusations about boys, about things that didn't fit inside even the ugliest caricature of 1960s repression. Were they tested in court? No. Were they widespread? No. But they were enough to stain his legacy's shadows, enough to make modern retrospectives uneasy. Brambell's life is a puzzle with missing pieces. He was reclusive, difficult, alcoholic, yet somehow functional enough to deliver razor-sharp comedy weekly. If he was hiding something, he did it in plain sight, behind the eyes of a man pretending to be dirty so no one looked too closely. Steptoe and Son was a show about a man who lived with his father and never escaped. Brambell, in a way, never escaped either. Not from fame, not from shame, not from the strange British urge to joke about monsters while keeping their names sacred. The classical titan, Sir John Gielgud. Sir John Gielgud was the kind of actor who made Shakespeare sound like it had been written specifically for him. With classical training and a voice that could hypnotize entire auditoriums, he had reached that rarefied British air where your surname becomes shorthand for an entire genre. By 1953, he'd been knighted. Just months after receiving his knighthood, Gielgud was arrested. The charge? Persistently importuning men for immoral purposes in a public toilet. Under laws of the time, homosexual acts between men were criminal, not frowned upon, not whispered about, but illegal. Gielgud pleaded guilty, paid a fine, and attempted to continue, but public outrage was swift and puritanical. Newspapers that had praised his Hamlet now relished his humiliation. He was booed during curtain calls. Someone taped a note to his dressing room. "You filthy swine." What makes this especially surreal, it happened during rehearsals for a play about moral ambiguity. Yet Gielgud didn't disappear. He didn't collapse under shame like others before him. Instead, he endured with that peculiar British resilience that looks like denial, but might be defiance. Over time, the scandal morphed from front-page disgrace to grim anecdote, from ruin to resurrection, and in some circles, to sympathy. Was he a villain? By today's standards, absolutely not. But in the moral panic of the 1950s, Gielgud was treated like one. A man celebrated for embodying kings was dragged through the gutter for being human. It wasn't the last time a titan of entertainment would fall, not for what they did to others, but for what society decided they weren't allowed to be. The icon, Sean Connery. Sean Connery didn't just play James Bond. He was James Bond before the character needed rebooting every few decades. He had the accent, the swagger, the eyebrow arch that could command a room. For much of the 1960s and beyond, he represented British masculinity's final form. Tuxedoed, unbothered, carrying just the right amount of concealed menace. But the problem with icons is that people stop questioning them until they speak. In a 1965 Playboy interview, Connery offered his views on hitting women, not fictional violence, but real-world philosophy. "An open-handed slap is justified," he said, "when a woman is being hysterical." When asked about this again in a 1987 Barbara Walters interview, he didn't walk it back. He doubled down, saying he hadn't changed his mind and that sometimes it was deserved. These weren't flippant, off-the-cuff remarks. They were delivered in the same tone he used for cocktail orders, like they were facts, and for a while they were treated as such. The reaction was tepid, a few raised eyebrows, a few shaken heads, but mostly silence. Because Connery was still Bond, still the hero, and inconveniently still charming. But reputations age. When Connery died in 2020, obituaries had to decide, legacy or honesty. Many tried for both, but the quote wouldn't stay buried. It resurfaced in headlines, think pieces, and social media threads. There's no criminal charge here, no courtroom transcript, just a documented philosophy aired repeatedly and unashamedly. It wasn't hidden. It was broadcast. And that's what makes it disturbing. Because Connery wasn't caught. He was believed. When a legend says something poisonous and the world nods along, it reveals more about the culture than the man.